To let you guys know, I'm going to show you two things today. The first one that you'll see on screen right now is I start a lot of my paintings traditionally. So I'm going to show you the difference between my traditional painting and my adding the computer color to it, and then a digital painting. So I'm going to jump right in. When I'm first sitting down and I'm doing my traditional work, I'll blow this up here. I'll start with a sketch, and then I just go ahead and start laying down paint, just like any, in any traditional work. And then as it goes through, I usually start with black, and I'll get a bunch of the shades down. I don't worry about any paint running or dripping. That's just how I personally like to paint. But I'll sit down and I'll do all of the black. Let's see if I can find it. You guys can follow that. And then I'll start patching in some lighter colors or some lighter shades or hues to start the highlighting. I like to paint on colored paper, and the reason is because I think it adds a bit of depth to it, and it allows you to have a base gray already built in. And I do paint with two hands. Been doing that since I was very young.
So have you been creating art from birth, Rob?
I have been creating art from birth. My entire family line are artists, but not by profession. So I was going to be the first, and I've been professionally painting since I was 16.
Okay.
And again, just to get a little bit closer view, when I'm working, I keep my reference very close to me, and I'll sit and paint just like that.
So you were professionally painting in high school?
I was professionally painting in high school. That was when I started working. I started working on Dungeons and Dragons stuff, and it's funny, when I really started painting with two hands when I had math homework due and I had a painting due, and so I was like, well, might as well try two hands. I think it's going to go quicker. And I like to use a watercolor pencil. That way I can get a lot of detail in, and if I want to spread it, oh, look at that. If when I want to spread it around, I can just add my water and let it bleed in with gouache, which these are all, this is a gouache paint. And for anybody who doesn't know what gouache is, it's like a cross between watercolor and acrylic. Oops, get that back. I also paint with pretty much anything I can grab, so I use a lot of toothbrush work to almost to emulate an airbrush. Anybody who followed anything I used to do, I used to airbrush everything way back in the early 90s. So if you go to my website, you'll see all my paintings, most of those are airbrushed from anything that's older. And then this would end up being the finished product. And what I do when I add color, and I'm going to do a quick demonstration of this in a second, is a lot of times I'll go in and I'll paint digitally and put it on like a soft light or an overlay, and I'll just let the painting come through. But it always depends on, the colors that I add on top of it have to really pull the painting out. So you'll notice I did a lot of yellow on her so I could pull this up to this corner. But it kept him slightly cooler with purples around the nose and pinks and that to separate him, to push him almost back. So it pulls her out, pushes him back, and it allows for a bit more realistic coloring on him. And I'm going to show you guys now how I go ahead and do that. Let me close these real quick here.
I have a question from Sumaya. I hope I'm pronouncing that name correctly. And she's asking, how big of a sketch do you start with?
13 by 19 usually is the size because I can work the fastest on it. Sometimes I do bigger paintings. Like when I'm doing gallery work, I do much, much larger paintings. I truly do believe that for me, doing something that's that size, I can get through really quickly. The painting I just put up right now, I painted that in about 45 minutes.
Oh, wow. That's fast.
I tend to work pretty fast. Now, the other thing I like to do, bring it up here, is I have the color palettes that I like to use. So it's easier for me to pick a color. Like I know I'm going to want this color to start. And I am using a dull Conte brush. So I'll start adding color around the edges, and I'll go back and forth to figuring out whether I want to overlay it or soft light. I like how it plays. Some of the color plays when you soft light something. It plays in the shadow areas. So
now, how are you doing the soft light? I have a couple panels open here. So was that via a layer?
Sure.
Okay. Oh, okay.
It's on a layer. So
The merge modes.
Yep.
Yeah. Sorry, I had a panel. My questions panel was covering up your your
Oh,
palette.
no worries. No worries. Here, I'll pull this over here a bit more. So I added a layer to it, and now I am just going in and adding some tones that I know that I'm going to take down. And I don't worry so much about going over the edges, obviously, because for one, in going to soft light, you don't have to worry so much about it, or even in going to an overlay, you don't have to worry so much about it. But I like some of the sloppiness, and maybe sloppy is the wrong word to use, but I like the messiness of it, and I like to keep it that way. So if things bleed over a little bit, that's okay.
Now, what kind of tablet are you using?
I'm using a Wacom Intuos.
Okay.
And maybe one of these times we can figure out how to get a GoPro camera in here. And
yeah, that would be
great. I'm working with two hands right now. What you guys can't see is that I've got two Intuos pens. You can't use two simultaneously, but I'll lift one. So when I'm doing this side, this is with my right hand. And popping over here, that's my left. So I pop back and forth very much like that. Now, I said that I use soft light to this, but like in this area, because it's this wonderful Conte brush, you get a lot of that Conte feel. I mean, you get that. So I like leaving that. So there are bits and pieces of this I might go back and just say, hey, I want to keep it sort of rough. So what I may do is I may go over here to layers and lighten it a bit. Let me change color here really quick.
Now, I see that you've got your color palette on a canvas, and I just wonder, do you ever end up using the mixer pad?
I do. I do. It kind of depends on what it is I'm working on. So I do use it, especially when, you know, I really need to get very specific on the colors. I don't have to be as specific here because I think I took it down to a multiply mode.
Okay.
I don't have to be as specific, so I'm not worried about it as much. When I'm doing a fully digital piece, which I'm going to show some examples of in a minute, I do mix all my own color. I do all of that.
Okay. Yeah, there's so many options for color in Painter. The mixer pad, your color sets, then you have the temporal color palette. So it really lets you work the way that you like to work. I like to think.
You know, I mean, yeah, it for being originally a traditional painter, it allows me, and this is the only program that I've ever used that allowed me to paint traditionally with computer. You know, it really has this wonderful feel to it.
And I love that you just said that. That's, you know, the main message that we try to get across to artists is that there really is nothing else like Painter out there. It's just getting people to, you know, at least download the trial and give it a test run.
Oh, I couldn't brag about it more or talk about it more. The program is amazing, and I'm not saying that just because you're on the line. I'd say that in pretty much anywhere that I speak. It's the only thing that can get me a traditional feel, and I think, you know, keeping that general feel, especially with art being, you know, the way I do it now, with very splotchy, and, you know, sometimes I'll take a glob of paint and I'll pitch it at the canvas and then paint around it. So yeah, I do a lot of that kind of work. So before I I'm not even sure on time, before I jump to showing a full digital painting, does anybody have any questions that they'd like me to answer?
Sure. Jenny asked, are all of the shadow and highlights done before you go into color?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And the reason is very much like the old masters, and not that I'm ever going to compare myself to the old masters, but I follow a lot of what they did, and that is get all of your hues, or get all of your lights and darks in first, because in adding, and I'll show you in a second here, in adding the colors even that I've added right now, I'm going to go ahead and add another layer really quick and add, we'll get crazy with some color just so you guys can see. So this is definitely not what I would do normally, but I can show you something here. Because I've done all of my highlight and my shadow work, I can use any of the multiply, the screen, the overlay, soft light, or whatever, and I don't have to worry so much about, you know, it kind of takes on a life of its own.
Yeah, that's really neat.
And like on this layer here, I did the multiply, but if I go to soft light, it has a hint of color. Now, it's not as much color as I'd want, but because all of my base is there already, that makes it easier. Now, when I'm working in fully digital, I don't always do it in a grayscale first. A lot of times, just to save time, I'll go ahead and work straight to color, but that's because I have a basic understanding of how to do all of my light and dark, the school term chiaroscuro, using all of that now allows me to do that in digital as well. What other questions before I leave this particular slide?
I've got one more, and Sumaya is wondering, how do you bring your work from canvas or paper into the computer? What's the easiest way to do that?
I just have a scanner. I take the paper and I line it up very carefully whenever I have to do seams. And what I mean by seams is when you put the two images together and make sure that you do it. But I just scan it in.
Okay.
If it's too large, then what I'll do is I will get a camera and I like to I like to take it outside, put it in the shade, and then make sure it's nice and flat, and then shoot a picture. I think that gives you the best look. And yeah, I mean but that's it. That's how I put it in.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. All right, let's pull this down. So that is me mixing my traditional painting with. Let me get rid of that. That's me mixing my traditional painting with Corel Painter. All right, let me pop something up here. Now this is all digital, and this is something I did to save time. I sort of did the quick aspect of it, but it comes from this picture. And the layers, let's see if I can find those. So it's got a blue background. And then what I basically went and did is I started putting, and I'm going to take off the layers as we go here. So, I start with the blue. In this particular instance, I just went ahead and dropped the computer pencil in. And then I started with laying a flat base. So I would lay a flat base down just so I have a color shade, a color to work off the blue. Then, this is going to be a fairly large jump. I go in and I start painting all of that. So, to set an example, I like using different layers. So that way, if I don't like something, I haven't messed something up that I can't go back to. So there are times if I'm doing a digital piece that I will use 100 layers. One of the great things that you can do is when you're capturing color, a lot of people have trouble transitioning from a color. So they'll go from, how'd you get this, to go to that. And you can just keep capturing down to get a smooth transition.
Okay, there's a lot of questions coming in here now.
Sure.
So they notice that you're working with many layers, and is that common practice for you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Again, I think the more layers you use, and this isn't even close to the amount of layers that I'll have on a painting. The more layers you use, the best example I can give is, let's say I go ahead and I start a new layer because I've got this particular layer here down exactly the way I want it. Now I've added a new layer and something like that happens. Yeah, you can go backwards, just Command Z, but you might get worked in there and you might really get it going, and you're 50, 60 strokes in, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, I don't like any of that. Now, if this was on a layer that I had already worked on, then I would have to go back and repaint this out. but instead I can just get rid of it. That's the reason that I do the multiple layers. I personally think that it saves time, oddly enough. What's another question?
Do you happen to use any other apps alongside Painter?
Most of the time I use Painter. I mean, for any of the painting, I use, obviously Painter to do all of my painting work. When I'm doing lettering, which I try not to do because I'm horrible at it, I'll use some other applications, but rarely. Rarely. This is my favorite, and I'm a creature of habit. So when I find something I like, I don't like to venture out too far. Unless it's like, I will say, unless it's like trying oil paint or trying different mediums. But again, the reason I like Painter is because if I want to switch to an oil paint, I can just go over there and switch. So I guess that was a very long answer of going, not really.
Okay. What media are you using right now?
I'm using a Conte. Okay. So I'm using, that's my favorite to use because of the texture I can get from it. I like using the gouache. Let's see, I'm going to go over to it really quick. I do like using the gouache. I use the watercolor occasionally. Sponge I use a lot. Airbrush to smooth some stuff out. But I also like using the smudging tools to smooth some stuff out.
Do you create your own custom brushes, or are you just using the out-of-the-box variants?
I do create my own custom brushes. I'm not doing it on this particular one because this one doesn't call for it. But I'll bring the next part up. So when I was doing, there we go. Let me get rid of this. So when I got further into it, I mean, this is all just me coming up with different brushes and doing different things and just having fun. But yes, I do create my own brushes. Again, the long answer.
Well, they're also wondering, do you have a workspace that anybody can download with some, that just highlights your favorite tools that you just mentioned?
I do. I never actually thought about doing that. If you guys would like me to do that, sure, I would be glad to.
Okay, so we'll just...
Yeah, I've never thought about it.
Everybody, it's very common that people ask for a workspace like that. We're actually going to be releasing some new workspaces, 6 different workspaces over the next week or so. Just because it helps people to narrow down the tools that they should use for particular jobs. It's a good starting point for people to experiment.
I love it. Yeah, I'm absolutely glad to do that. Now you'll notice that there is a ton of layers. Let's see if I can get rid of that one. See? So you can see where I started building everything up. This is all my highlighting layers that I released a layer. I took a layer off that was one of my base layers. And now I'm putting it back on.
Now,
so you can see the,
sorry
go ahead.
about that. You've got your photo reference here. Is that common practice for you that you work from photo reference?
Yes and no. That question. It depends on the piece. It depends on how I feel. It depends on how fast I have to get it done. If I need to do a piece that's got to be done really fast, I'll use photo reference. I don't always have the exact photo reference. So let's say I'm doing painting a warrior that's coming out. I might take a picture of myself or one of my friends like screaming or whatever and just light them hard from the side. The photo won't be anything like the painting, but it will give me an idea of how it has to look. I do that a lot. I just thought of a Poser. There's a program called Poser that I sometimes use just for lighting, just so I can see where the lighting was. Now this picture had to be of this particular girl, so that's why I'm using a photo in this piece, is because it had to be her, so I couldn't make her up. So that's sort of the reason that I have the reference on this.
And you're referencing the photo, but you're not using any of the cloning capability in Painter, are you?
No, no. I like to reference stuff and then use it to paint from. I think that is usually, for me, that's the best way to work for me. I've seen a lot of people do, the cloning and stuff, and I think, if you can do it successfully, great. I'm also not that good at it, so I'm like, it's just easier for me to paint it. Plus, I've been painting for so long in my lifetime that it's sort of second nature for me. So it's easier for me just to look at something and go, oh, I know I need to paint this, so I'll go in.
Yeah, that makes sense because you have the background and the skill to do it, where I know a lot of the photographers nowadays, it's a lot easier to work from a clone and to add that painted feel. You still hand paint with brush strokes, but a lot of the photographers don't have the art background, and they ask me that quite often.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
That comes with a lot of practice and that. And the other thing is when you're using it for the photo purposes and the photo manipulation and stuff, you don't really, that's when the cloning is done the best, and it's a fantastic thing. I mean, it's amazing. I watch other people use it. I'm like, man, that's cool. I'm not that good with it because I don't use it. I don't use that property enough.
Now, Jenny's asking, when you want to challenge yourself, what kinds of ways would that be?
Oh, that's a good one. Well, it's funny because I was working on a movie last year, and just to let everybody out there know, I direct movies for a living, really. I was working on a movie, and I was in my right hand I was sketching on a piece of paper. My left hand I was typing on my computer, and I was answering questions to the staff as they were coming in. So stuff like that's challenging. I'm going to be going on stage with a rapper called Tech 9 coming up again. I've done it once already, and I painted a 4-foot by 8-foot painting in an hour and a half, and that was challenging. So the next time I'm going on stage, I've decided that I'm going to paint 2 paintings, one basically with each hand as I'm on stage. So I try and up myself all the time in challenges, I guess, because maybe it's just because I'm stupid. I don't know. I don't know why I do it. But again, long answer to that is yes, I try and challenge myself all the time. And just on a pure painting level, I like to pick harder paintings when I'm doing, especially for myself. I like to pick things that are super difficult to see if I can figure out easier ways to do them.
Okay, that's
I hope that answers Jenny's question.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know Jenny's sitting there now going, God, it was just a little question. He just kept talking.
Do you feel like, I mean, that's got to be very challenging, I think, when you're on stage creating a painting, because you don't have the luxury. I don't know if that was during the length of the concert or how that worked. There's a definitive ending point where you can't keep mucking around with the painting. Do you?
Oh, yeah.
Are you okay with that? Sometimes do you walk away thinking, oh, I could have done more, or?
Oh, I always walk away thinking I could have done more, all the time. But sometimes you just have to go, you know, I've done enough, and it's just going to be what it's going to be. And you kind of just have to know when enough is enough, and just walk away. So it's one of the harder things to do, but when you can do it, it's, you know, it also becomes it becomes a saving point for your sanity, I think. So I'm just blowing it up pretty large. When I got in here in the mouth area, that's pretty much one. I think the teeth are on a different layer and the lips are on a different layer. But, you know, a lot of times I get asked, how do you get the detail? And I mean, it's a little easier when you're looking at a reference picture. Let's see if I can blow that up a bit. You know, I can see where the paint has to go. One of the mistakes I feel a lot of my students make is that they think that this white is white. It's not. It's very off-white. So that way, if I was to use a pure white, I mean, it would really stand out. And you want to make sure, like the eyes are let me put a layer back. A lot of people will paint the eyes as like very white. Again, that's not white. That's slightly off-white. If you can take your highlights and make sure that you use an off-white and make sure it's not as bright white, you can make your highlights way more powerful just by using a solid white. So your reflections and your highlights become stronger, so you can pinpoint things. I believe in a painting that you have to have a focus point, and then your eye, just again like the old masters, would lead the eye around the painting. And there are different layouts. There's a triangle, circle, T, inverted T. So there are definitely certain layouts that you can use that help guide the eye around the paint.
And we do have included in Painter Divine Proportion tool.
Yes, you do.
You can lay on the canvas, just in case anyone had never used that. It is available, and it could help to guide the focal points of your painting.
You know, it's funny because that's a fantastic tool, especially when you know, younger painters are trying to figure out, well, how do I do a layout? You know, you can do that, use that, and it starts to teach, you know, what kind of layout you wanna get on there. Because again, I'm gonna bring the finished piece here. Shrink this down for a second.
I know that you do tons of commercial work, and you've mentioned just a couple of the projects, but do you ever paint anything just for yourself?
Oh, man, that's a great question. I'm starting to a little bit. I'm starting to paint more just for me. You know, if you guys want, I'll bring up one of my own pieces and show you something.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Sure.
They're interesting.
This is the finished piece. And again, I look at it now that I'm actually looking at it, I haven't seen this piece in a while. I look at it and go, wow, there's like 5,000 things I would have done differently, or I would go back and do. But I won't, because once a piece is finished, just let it go. A lot of times people will work stuff and overwork it and overwork it and overwork it.
Okay, that was another question that came through. Do you ever go back and redo anything or continue? working on something that you had considered?
Almost never.
Okay.
Almost never. Because, not to get all, weird and philosophical, but I believe a piece is finished when it's finished. And unless you go in with the mindset that this piece is going to take me 5 years, and I'll do a little bit here and a little change it, I think the life of the piece just needs to be what it is. It just needs to be a finished piece. Let's see. I'll do two things here. Let me close these out. I do think, by the way, maybe before I close this one, skin palettes, color palettes are super, super important. People tend not to use them sometimes because I don't know why. I preach color palettes all the time because I think, just like I just did right here, so if you need to do crossing colors, you know that if you cross this color, you can get this. So a lot of times what I'll do is you'll see X's. Like here you don't, but if I'm doing a piece, I'll take one of my main colors and I'll cross it with other pieces and go, okay, I know that this here is another midtone. Using a color palette like this will save your life on a painting most of the time, especially if you have to ever go back. Let's say you're doing a commercial piece. You have to go back and change it because your client wants you to. Sure, you can capture the color from the painting itself, but there's going to be times that you're going to have to go back to your original palette, and if you don't have it, it's put me behind when I haven't had it. Let me pop up. I'm going to pop up two. This is a finished piece. There it goes. With full color that I finished just like I did the Bane piece. This is what a piece looks like when it's done. And then something more for me.
It's that hard for you to find something? I'm just joking with you.
I don't do many pieces for myself. This is something for a project that they let me do whatever I want, called Telltale Heart, but they just let me paint. They let me just go off and do it. And so there's more of a piece that I did for me. And I say that, and now that I think about it, it was still for a client. But they allowed me to do whatever it is I wanted. And I think I did 27 pieces. So I don't ever wake up in the day and go, I think I'm going to paint myself something. I just, someday I'll be able to do that, but not for a while. I've got 2 TV shows that'll be coming out, and I'm directing a movie in October, so my time is slightly limited when it comes to that. Are there any other questions that I can answer? I'm going to bring up one more piece here.
I'm looking through right now. Sumaya did say that the eyes of the painting that you were working on previously were amazing, just so you know that.
Oh,
and they truly were.
Thank you so much.
And I have a question for you.
Absolutely.
I'm wondering, I'm still shocked that you were professionally painting at 16. And I wonder, how did you go from grade school to professional painting at the age of 16 and get where you are today? Is there any advice that you can give to anybody?
Yes, repetition. I went and even at 16, I submitted my stuff over and over and over and over. And really the key to anything is repetition. I I know a lot of younger artists. I'm popping up a few other pieces on the screen right now. I know a lot of younger artists who don't or didn't, like they would send something in and then they just get rejected and then give up. And I think that's the biggest mistake, because there are so many talented young artists that, you know, don't be afraid of getting rejected. Everybody's got rejected, you know, at one point or another. Just keep doing it. And you know, as for me, when I was that young, I can just remember. I remember being rejected. Like, I started sending out paintings when I was 14. So for 2 years, I got rejected solidly. And then when I was, you know, lucky enough when I was 16 to get published. Yeah, you just got to keep doing it. That's a great thing. And by the way, anybody who wants to ask questions after this or whatever, you can always go to any of the social media sites that I'm on. I try and answer questions for artists all the time, especially younger artists, because, you know, it's not an easy path, but it's a really rewarding path, and if you stick with it, you know, you'll love it. There's nothing that I can think of that's better than getting to do what you love. So, A, don't give up, and B, repetition. Same as, you know, when you're learning to paint. If whatever it is, if you can't paint cloth, then my suggestion is paint some sort of cloth over and over and over until you understand how to do a fold. You know, that's probably some of the most important things. Yeah.
Okay, terrific.
I just pulled up some of my other pieces. This is a half digital, half watercolor piece, mostly digital. That I went in. There's something about every painting that I do, and the fact is I hide a chicken head in every single painting. So if you go and you're starting to look for through my paintings, you'll find a digital chicken head nowadays. It used to be a painted chicken head in there, and you can go on my website and see what the actual chicken head looks like. But there's a chicken head hidden in every painting, and every now and then I hide other things, like right there is a flying pig. So I hide a lot of stuff in my work.
That's so funny. There are quite a few. I know that we're at the end of our session here, but I'm going to throw out one more question. And for those that came in that we didn't quite get to, I'll be sure to follow up with those after the session, because there's a lot of questions about how you build your color palettes, or how do you pick skin colors. And so the main one that I'll end with right here is kind of twofold question. How long, so let's say for the red brick road right here, how long do you typically have to create a painting like that, and what resolution do you paint it at?
I paint it at 200, and somewhere about 3/4 in or almost close to the end, I'll bump it to 300 and do my finest detail at 300. So it's a printable, that's, you know, 300 DPI is usually your printing size, or your printing DPI. So somewhere towards the end, I'll start painting at about 200 though. And so wait, that was a two-part question. What was the first part of that one?
Well, the second part is, how long would they give you to create something like this? You know, for most of the pieces that you have here, is there...
This piece I had to have done in 2 days.
Wow.
There's probably 20 hours in it, which is, I don't normally take that long, but this is for my TV show that's coming out. So Warner Brothers was like, we need to see the characters. These are all painted separately and then dropped in. And again, we don't have the time for me to show that, but so I painted the lion per se, um, on a full other painting, dropped him in, and then painted on top of it so I could blend him in. Because I had to take each of the characters, and when you're doing something for a TV show, you have to have character pieces so you show what the characters look like. And in this one, they wanted to see a finished piece of what they believed that the characters would look like. There we
go. Okay, so did you actually have to build each character individually to submit to them, and then they wanted the overall poster for the show? Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So doing that piece was a nightmare because it really was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 separate paintings then painted onto one piece.
Yeah.
So
in 20 hours. So
yeah, you're never given much time, and I feel sometimes the more professional you are or the more you work, the faster people expect you to go. You know, when I'm doing these pieces, like this is all traditional, and this piece took me, I was timing myself, and this piece took me about 11 minutes.
11 minutes. Dang.
You know, this is a typical probably 40-minute piece. So it depends. When I'm doing prints and stuff like that that I have at shows or something, they're roughly about 40 minutes, no more than an hour. And then when I'm doing digital pieces, when I'm doing the digital pieces, I want to say that if this was just a solid piece and maybe without the characters, you know, maybe it was just her, a big face, a castle, and stuff like that, I probably could have got it done in 15 hours, 14 hours. So around there. Again, long explanation, but that's basically the time periods and the resolutions.
No, that was very helpful. And this entire session was so inspirational. So I just want to give you a huge thanks. Thanks for doing this for us. And I look forward to scheduling some more sessions with you in the future so that we can learn even more about your work. And for all of you on the line here, the whole session has been recorded. So I'll have that up probably within the next 24 hours. And you can always go and visit Rob Pryor's website, which is robpryor.com, and you'll see tons of samples of his work and his two-handed painting and exactly where he's going to be on the road. So maybe at some shows you can visit him because Rob is a very busy guy and he's out and about a lot.
I do all the Wizard World shows. Wizard World's a comic convention, so I do all of those. So yeah, any of you stop in, say hi. You know, try not to throw something at me. I don't know.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Rob. Thank you, everybody that attended today. We hope to see you on future sessions. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and close down the session. So have a wonderful day, everybody.